Hello, and welcome back to part 2 of the Dyson DC04 strip down video. And when we left it in part 1, we had stripped the machine down and we got as far as removing our motor housing from the machine. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be further stripping down the motor housing to get the motor out, which is what we are aiming to do. So what we're going to do now is we're going to remove this grey retainer, and from what I can remember the last time I did this, it has some lugs here in the side which you need to put your screwdriver in and pop out to release. Being gentle, of course, because we don't want to be snapping lugs off, do we? Because that wouldn't be good. So again, we can go around the outside of here with our screwdriver and just pop out this retainer ring like so, and just take a note here of whether it goes in a specific way before I put it to one side. I don't think it matters too much on that one. I think it's... What I remember is there was a label saying Dyson on the plastic here, and I will just make sure that that is lined up with this part here when I put it back on. So if I do get stuck, I can always play back the video. I shouldn't get stuck because I have disassembled these quite a few times before in the past, but it's been a long time ago. So you might notice now that the cable enters the machine at this point, and when we pull our motor out, that cable is going to be pulled through this hole. So we want to make sure that we've got this body, because obviously we're not removing the cable from the switch housing here. There's going to need to be a little bit of slack here to be able to pull the motor out. So just make sure we can see that, if we can. So basically I'm going to push that down into the motor housing, that little grommet there, so it's like this. And that will give some slack now for the motor, basically, to be pushed from the rear, from this spindle. We're going to push that spindle out of the machine, and the motor should then pop out like that. Okay, that's very, very simple, isn't it? Very simple indeed. And what we've got then is, here's the power cable that goes to the switch, and you'll have your two connections here. So we're going to be pulling the connections apart. Red goes to brown and the grey goes to blue. So all you need to remember is you've got two terminals on it. Red is live, blue to neutral. So we can take those connections off and put our motor bucket to one side, like so. And now we're down literally to the motor. And with the motor, we remove the rubber mounting from the one end, and we can remove the rubber fan case seal from the other end, like so. And again, you can see how clean that is, because I did fully strip this motor down, this machine down, sorry, when I had it, and I cleaned all this out before. That's why it's also marvellously clean in there, because believe me, that was absolutely black inside there. When I have a machine, I will always try to strip it right back down. Now, the motor we've got in here is a YDK YV511. So that is not an aftermarket motor. I've got a feeling that is the original DC04 motor that was in here. I've got a feeling it might be now. I know the DC07s use a YDK, but I think they're a more powerful motor than this. It doesn't have its wattage stamped on it, this motor doesn't. If anybody knows about how to date these motors from that, I don't know whether it can be dated from that. I'm not an expert with Dyson motors, unfortunately. So here we can see our motor, and here we can see the carbon brushes just inside there. And I would imagine it's quite rare for those carbon brushes to actually wear right down. I would imagine that with one of these, what would happen before that happened would be the bearings would fail. But this motor is actually in very good condition. So let's just imagine now, here's your old motor, you've taken that away, thrown it in the dustbin, and here's your brand new motor. Okay, so now we're going to go through the reverse process to fit your brand new motor to your Dyson. So welcome to the reassembly. Actually, while I've got it out, what I might do is put a couple of drops of oil on that bearing, seeing as I've got it out. I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to get the fan case housing off on this very easily, but as the motor spins quite nicely anyway, I don't think it's necessary on this one to get that off, to take the fan off, because the fan inside, as you can see, is quite clean. There's no dirt and dust inside there. It's been used with its pre-motor filtering obviously, and it's kept the motor very clean inside. But it would be possible to, you'd have to use the screwdriver in here or some kind of thing to bend that back slightly to, there's a crimp in here, there's a crimp there, a crimp there and a crimp there. You'd have to be able to loosen those off and then be able to hammer this off somehow. This would be a bit more tricky to remove, this one would, to other types. Again, these are not designed to be dismantled, these motors. They're 20 quid to buy on eBay, a pattern part replacement for these. So if your motor is shot, basically, throw it out and just buy another pattern part replacement. It's just not worth sometimes taking motors to pieces when you can get them so cheaply as an aftermarket part. But I will just put a spot of oil on that end bearing. Not too much, because this is obviously the bearing part here. This is the end where the belt links onto, and I don't want to be getting oil on that there, because otherwise all that's going to happen is the belt's going to slip on the spindle. So let's put our rubber bung back on, like so. I will get some tissue just to wipe that excess oil off. Because by now what I've put on should have run through into the bearing, and I don't want any excess getting onto that drive shaft spindle. There we go, that'll do. Right, so we've got our rubber bung back on it, we've put our fan case seal back on, and push that up, like so. And now we can get our housing back, and inside our housing we've got our connections. So we will connect our red wire up to our brown wire, and we'll collect the grey wire to the blue. I will do it that way around. Click those nice and firmly into position. If they're loose, I would get my pliers if I can find them. I can't at the moment, so I will just use the mole grips here and just squeeze that connector together a little bit, just to make sure it's a little bit tighter. That's better. The last thing you want is those pulling apart when you're pushing the motor back in here, because if it happens the machine won't work when you turn it on, obviously. So now we're going to push our motor back into its housing. So before we push it in all the way, I'm going to just pull, as we're pushing that back in, that cable out of the top, and click the grommet back into position in the housing there, and then we can put it on its end and squeeze the motor back down into the housing so that the rubber engages into the plastic cutout in the end, like so. Very easy, very easy. Now we've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the plug in and just test it, just to make sure that that cable hasn't come apart inside there, because that has been known to happen to me before, and I got it all back together, turned it on and realised it didn't work, and then I've had to strip it all down again to find that that connection inside there had pulled itself apart while I was pushing the motor back in. So before I go any further, this is going to be noisy, so hands over your ears. Okay, that's fine. That's working. So plug out, and then we will put our retainer ring back on, and it's had the little Dyson symbol here, the printing on it, at that end. So these lugs here around the outside, these lugs will correspond with 1, 2, 3, 4 holes on the side. That's the general idea anyway. No, it's not right. I haven't done that properly. It didn't come out that way. So what we do is turn it round again. It does go in one way specific. It's got one side that has got, let's just get that out of there again. One side of this, you see these, the way these little parts stick out along the side here, one there and one there. Well, on that edge it hasn't got one of those, so that'll be the edge that goes here. That's why it was stiff to go in. So let's put it in that way. If something's stiff and doesn't feel right, the chances are usually it isn't right. So you've got to go back and have another think. But yes, that is the way it goes in, because it went in nice and easily that way. Right, so there we go. There's our motor housing done with our new motor in. Let's just imagine it's a nice new motor in there. Now what we can do, bring that back around again, turn the motor so that its spindle is facing that direction, and we need to get that part of the housing back on as well. So this will have to go back around onto the front of here, like so. And again, the camera didn't say that, did it? The camera's too high. Basically, that part there, can we see it now, has to go back onto here, like so, before we put it back in. Let's get that brush roll out of the way as well. Okay, now, here's our pipe, the circular pipe that goes round on the outside. So we can mount that back in its hole. Can we see that on the camera? Yeah. Like so. So that it's in that position. Okay. Now, I'm going to push, and this keeps wanting to fall backwards all the time, so you've got to be a bit careful. Locate the motor back in, like so. Alright, that's fairly easy to do, as long as you make sure that that doesn't come out of where it's supposed to come from, that pipe. Now we can start to put our screws back in, all 8 of them. So I shall have that one in, that one in, that one in, that one in. To get this one in, I shall see if it will go on the end of the little Allen key first before I put it in its hole, which is round here. A little bit fiddly this one is, so I'll start with putting that one in. That's one. And then I'll put the one in at the opposite corner, which is down here. Lovely. And then I'll put the two in the base here. There is actually one point I need to note here, and I've just seen I've made that same mistake again. This cable, right, has to come down here, and when it gets to the bottom it needs to be inside there, not there. So before I tighten any more of these up further, I need to unslacken that one off and push that cable across into there, okay? Focus, thank you. I think I might need to just pull the camera angle up slightly on this. There we go. So I'm going to slacken this off again, just enough to be able to get that cable into its correct routing. Like so. Then you run it back into there. Oh, the dogs are out again, barking their heads off. Next door's dogs again. They're going on Monday, so hopefully we'll be rid of that noise. Right, so the cable's now located. The cable's located in its hole down the back of the spine. So what we need to do now is to do our screws back up properly. And put the other one in the bottom of here. Yeah, so that would have been a bit of a gaff, that would have, hadn't have noticed that again. That cable, very important that that is secured in where it should be, because once you've tightened all those screws up, the last thing you want to do is to have to go and untighten them all again to push that cable back in. So fully tighten those. And then we can retighten the remaining screws in the top. That one. That one. And that one's already tight. So tighten that one up just a second ago. So that's all our 8 screws back in. And from this point there's actually no more screws. No more screws to do. That's one of the best things about these old ones, is there were so few screws that you had to undo. Right, so now what we can do is to put our, let's just have a look, zoom our parts over here. Yes, we need to put our floor head back on now from this point, so turn it back over. And I stand it on the side of the bench here, so I'll need to move the camera back over to there. Let's get our floor head. So, in the same way as we removed it, we're going to slide our floor head back onto here and here, onto the 2 areas where the bearings are. Before I do that, we'll put a little tiny bit of oil on this bearing, and the one on the other side as well. And that will help the bearings to be nice and smooth. So again, we're going to pull these outwards. One, two, like so. Very simple indeed. And also then at that point put a little tiny bit of oil on here, onto that wheel, just to keep that nice and smooth. Now we can put our retainers back on. One on this side two, one on the other side. Now we put our clutch cover back on. Where's that gone? Here. So tip all the screws out first, so you've got no screws in it. Slide it up. No, forgot one vital thing. We're going to put the belt back on the clutch. Sorry, the clutch belt back on the spindle. So I shall do that now. That's done. Don't forget to put the belt on before you put the cover back on. Put the cover back on. Slide it in. Push it down. Put the bottom two screws in, just here. I'm going a bit quicker now because I need to get this finished before this video ends in the next 8 minutes, because I don't want to do a part 3 of this. Other screw back in. Then I'm going to put my, where's my Allen key gone? My Allen driver, here it is. Put your screw onto the end of the Allen driver, and then I'm going to lower it down into that hole very carefully and do it up. You've got to be careful here, but it's the best way of doing it, as I found the other night. Put it on the end of your Allen key and lower it into the hole, and then tighten it up down there. Done. Right, now I'm going to put the internal hose back on this stub, like so, in this configuration. I think, yes, that's how it went. Yeah. Put the other end of the internal hose onto the back of here. Click that on. And then I'm going to put my floor head back into here. Click those into position. Now I'm going to get my brush roll. Where's that gone? Just there. There's the brush roll. We will put our... I think what I might do is put this in last. First of all, I will get my belt around it. So, again, I did mention about the special tool that you can buy to be able to help making this, getting this back on easier, that you can buy it from Manchester Backs. That's on the other video I did about the clutch. But I just do it this way, to be honest. When the belt is a little bit worn, it's easier to get on. Now I'm going to put my bearings back on with the spindle. So there's the first one into this end. The end caps, I should say, really, not the bearings. Let's put this one on back on this end. This is when I had the issue with it the other night, when it wouldn't turn properly. So what I'm going to do, before I start it, I'll run the machine now just to make sure that that's actually in. So let's plug it in again. Get in there. Right, turn it on. Cover your ears. Okay, plug out. Put our base plate back on. Just make sure that we can still see. Yeah, we can. So we'll slide that back in to the lugs on the front, pull it back down, do our little screws up. And then I will test it again, because this was the point the other night that it didn't actually work. works a treat. Absolutely wonderful, that. Now, do we need anything else on the bottom part? Yes, we need our U-bend. So we can put our U-bend back on. And then pushes in. Goes in nice and easily because we haven't got the hose in the back as yet. Just checking my parts over there. We don't need anything else on the bottom now, so we can stand it back vertical again. Like so. Just turn the camera. Excellent. Now I can put my filter back in the top. And put the filter cover back on. That's fine. Making sure that those tabs there line up perfectly with the tabs underneath, and you'll be able to see when that's on right, because there's a little cutout in the front here as well. So that cutout there has to line up with that dot. So it's important that, otherwise that won't go on properly. We can put our blockage port back on the side. Okay, turn it back round. Get our hose. And the hose will push back down into here. Until it clicks, until it engages. And then we can have our handle. So we can slide our hose back into here. Put the handle on. And now the bin. And that's it. Just put it in and test it. And we just put it down on the carpet there and give it a push backwards and forwards. Make sure the clutch is engaged properly, and I'm going to just push it back and forwards now. And there we go. That is basically within an hour there, and I've been taking a bit longer because I've had to keep stopping, checking the camera and showing how things are done. But that's how I would change the motor in a DC04. And with that, it's time to end the video. On the next one, the next technical one, I shall try and show possibly a DC07, or we might even have a look at the DC03, take that one apart. But I'll see you again on the next video.